opened up and we started talking about the mushroom farm, the culinary mushroom farm, and Avery told me about how many people came in asking for those kind of mushrooms. I have a background in drug policy reform, and so we thought we should maybe try to organize people and see who's interested in this burgeoning movement of legalization of psychedelics, particularly psilocybin. And so we sponsored the state's first statewide gathering on discussing the legalization of psilocybin. And from that, it was such a great program and people were so energized that we decided to form the New Yorkers for the New York Psilocybin Action Committee. And since then, and that was in April, we've been having monthly meetings. We've been doing them as a hybrid here in Troy at Color City Mushrooms, sometimes at the Sanctuary for Independent Media, and now here. Thank you to City Council President Carmela Mantello for hosting us here tonight, and to Emily Men. I think both of you had this idea, and we're joined also by Irene Soriento and Kiani Conley Wilson. I think that's all here in person, maybe some online. But we also have traveled to Kingston and we've had meetups joining our Zoom meetings from Brooklyn and Buffalo. So this is truly a statewide movement, and we're looking forward to doing that, taking the show on the road more and more often. So it's an exciting movement, and we've had featured guest speakers for every meeting, and tonight I'm really excited about our guest speaker. So let's get right to it, and I'm going to introduce the co-presidents of New Yorkers for Mental Health Alternatives, and that is Avery Stemple from Color City Mushrooms and Pammy Jackson from the Psychedelic Sisterhood. And I'm going to pass it over to you now.
Great. So first, I would like to say, I know, unfortunately, the law enforcement panel that we invited didn't really materialize, but I want to acknowledge, and Joe is here as a firefighter, a retired firefighter, and I do want to acknowledge that police officers, state troopers, sheriffs, EMTs, firefighters, code enforcement officials, and their associated dispatchers have all chosen their professions because they are interested in keeping their communities safe. They are often exposed to trauma and forced to constantly make difficult, potentially life-impacting decisions at a moment's notice. They are far too often offered little to no mental care support. Our frontline warriors tasked with responding to emergencies, helping citizens, and protecting everyone deserve opportunities to heal without fearing the loss of their jobs and credibility. So as Corinne said, yes, my name is Avery Stemple. I am the owner operator of Color City Mushrooms, an indoor urban vertical mushroom farm, mycological education center, and community gathering space.
And my name is Pamela Jackson. I'm the founder and executive director of the Psychedelic Sisterhood, a women-led organization focused on, creating safe spaces for self-improvement, wellness practices, and altered states.
And owning a gourmet mushroom farm, customers constantly come in to ask if I have psilocybin mushrooms, like I mentioned. Usually with tears in their eyes, they plead for help for themselves or for their loved ones. Or tell me about how they are currently taking psilocybin they have already acquired and how it has been an incredibly effective treatment. My personal psilocybin experiences have led me to be the person I am. It has allowed me to navigate my own bouts of severe depression, see the interconnectivity of all things, and to pour my insights into creativity through poetry, art, and creativity, music.
And prior to me founding the Psychedelic Sisterhood, I began my healing journey with psychedelics in 2015, when my depression and suicide ideation was at an all-time high and talk therapy wasn't enough. I stand before you alive, thriving, and completely transformed because of my responsible use of psychedelic substances, such as ayahuasca, psilocybin, and MDMA. In the past 2 years of producing and facilitating wellness programs, an increasing number of new members have attended our events searching for alternative solutions to pharmaceutical medications that leave them feeling mentally hazy, emotionally numb, and overall disconnected from their friends and loved ones. Knowing this, we knew we needed to find a way to help people further.
And out of our shared connection through mushrooms, we came together to form the New York Psilocybin Action Committee, a group that is dedicated to creating real, lasting change for people struggling with processing their traumas and attempting to heal, to cope, to recover, and to find meaning in their lives.
And our umbrella organization, New Yorkers for Mental Health Alternatives, a 501c4 nonprofit, focuses on destigmatizing all psychedelic use as well as alternative mental well care modalities.
So psilocybin is safe. It is consistently ranked by experts as the safest of all mind-altering substances, including alcohol and cannabis, in terms of its potential for physical, psychological, and social harm. It is entirely non-addictive and remarkably non-toxic, even in amounts much higher than those taken by typical users.
Psilocybin is therapeutic. It has been shown to have significant therapeutic value in addressing the most intractable mental health issues New Yorkers face, including depression, addiction, suicidality, and more.
Psilocybin use reduces criminality. Users of psilocybin have up to 27% lower arrest rates for violent and property crimes than the general population. They also have lower rates of recidivism. And these pro-social effects are likely due to psilocybin's well-evidenced tendency to increase positive personality traits such as altruism, empathy, compassion, and concern for others.
Use of psilocybin is increasing and support for decriminalization is growing. 28% of American adults have used a psychedelic substance, with 13% having tried psilocybin. Since 2015, the percentage of American adults that have used a hallucinogen in the past year has grown 44%. Polling shows that psilocybin is psychedelic substance that Americans are most in favor of decriminalizing, and a majority support research of psychedelics for the treatment of veterans and active military with PTSD.
Municipalities, districts, even entire states across the country are coming to the realization that cognitive liberty and bodily autonomy are rights that individuals should have. Psilocybin in particular has either been decriminalized or deprioritized in the cities of Arcata, Oakland, San Francisco, Santa Cruz, Somerville, Cambridge, East Hampton, Northampton, Ann Arbor, Detroit, Hazel Park, Port Townsend, Seattle, all of Washtenaw County in Michigan, Washington, D.C., and the entire states of Colorado and Oregon.
Task forces or law approving broader research and study have been proposed or passed in Texas, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maryland, Washington, Utah, Missouri, Georgia, Oklahoma, Hawaii, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, California, Virginia, and Maine.
And at the federal level, Senators Rand Paul and Cory Booker have introduced the Bipartisan Breakthrough Therapies Act that would recategorize psilocybin as a Schedule II substance, allowing for limited medical use.
A wave of change is coming.
Those responsible for crafting the laws are beginning to recognize that no one should be criminalized for their attempts to heal.
So lawmakers in New York have proposed 4 bills that impact psilocybin accessibility. Senator Gustavo Rivera, Senate Bill S-8618 passed and was signed into law and authorized the automatic rescheduling of any substance that is rescheduled at the federal level. Assemblymember Pat Burke has proposed A-8569, a bill that would amend the public health law to allow for the medical use of psilocybin in a tightly controlled set of circumstances.
Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal has proposed 2 bills, A-6065, that would decriminalize psilocybin statewide, and A-7928, which would establish the Psychedelic Research Institute and the Psychedelic Substances Therapeutic Research Program charged with studying and providing recommendations regarding the use of psychedelic substances in the treatment of addictive disorders, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, end-of-life anxiety, and pain management.
It is time we build a new system of well care that allows for the integrated use of holistic healing through natural alternatives and comes with the promise of hope for a brighter tomorrow.
Thank you, Avery and Amy, for that, Avery and Tammy for that introduction. I am so delighted to introduce to you our next speaker. Or I think our main speaker for the evening. Joe McKay is a retired New York City firefighter and an elevator mechanic. He was born and raised in Staten Island and is married with 2 kids. He most recently lobbied Congress for passage of the PACT Act, which is a bill that many of you may be familiar with dealing with veterans who've experienced exposure to toxins. And he was one of the movers and shakers that got the 9/11 bill passed, along with John Stewart, to provide access to health services for people who responded to 9/11. He serves on the board of Cluster Busters, which is an organization he'll tell you more about. And I just feel like we are really in for a treat to listen to Joe talk to us about his experience and his advocacy. So I'm going to pass it over to Joe.
Public speaking is not my favorite thing to do, but. So, hi, everybody. My name is Joe McKay. I'm a retired New York City firefighter, and I hope today that I can give you a picture of how psilocybin changed my life. On September 11, 2001, I was off duty. We were helping to run a FDNY fundraiser when we got the news of what was going on downtown Manhattan. I called the firehouse right after, and I spoke to Shotzi. Shotzi had been working that tour so I can get off it. We talked a bit about the fire and all those people in the building that were in trouble and they needed to be rescued. Shortly after I hung up the phone with them, we saw the second plane hit the tower and we knew it was no accident. Well, everybody did at that point. We got orders to commandeer a bus and get to the World Trade Center. We did. When we got there, everybody knows what it was like, right? I mean, hell on earth. It was like, I felt like it was an apocalyptic movie, but it was real. We got to work searching for survivors, putting out fires. And during this time, I received a phone call from Jeanette, who was Shotzi's wife. She asked if I had seen him, and I told her no. I said, but he could be anywhere down here. It's the whole downtown. It's a mess, and he could be in a hospital, getting his eyes washed out or treated or something. After about 2 days, a list of the missing firefighters came out, and unfortunately, Shotzi was on it. I found out later on that Jeanette had just confirmed that she was pregnant with the third child, and they were going to celebrate when they got home, when he got home from that tour. So altogether, out of the 343 firefighters, I knew 26, 4 from my company, Engine Company 201 in Brooklyn. In the months following, we worked searching for the missing, tending to the families of those we lost. And if we weren't working on the pile or working in the firehouse, we were attending memorials and funerals. And sometimes there were 8 a day. We couldn't make all of them. And we had a lot of volunteers come in and stand for these funerals. So needless to say, all of us down on the pile, were not in a good place, myself included. And I thought things couldn't get any worse. And then I got my first attack. I woke up at 1 a.m. and I felt like someone had just stabbed me in the eye with a burning hot ice pick. But there was no ice pick. There was no blood. It was pain. I had never experienced that kind of pain before. I've been burnt. I've been knocked around quite a bit. Never experienced anything like that. I thought I was having an aneurysm. I really thought I was going to die. I ended up in the emergency room, and a few hours later, they sent me home with no answers. The attacks continued. They came at night, mostly after I fell asleep. And after a few more nights in the emergency room, I just gave up. And I would just bang my head against the wall to take my mind off the pain. If I get the pain on the left side, I would bang my right side of my head against the wall. This is not uncommon. A lot of cluster headache patients do this to take their mind off the pain. A few weeks later, I was officially diagnosed with trigeminal autonomic cephalalgia. I know it's a mouthful. Otherwise known as cluster or suicide headache. And it's the most painful condition known to mankind. And I don't say that because I have it. I say it because there was a study done. And people compared childbirth, gunshots, shingles, all these painful conditions, and cluster headache came out way over the top. Over the years, I've heard many stories from ER doctors about people doing crazy things to escape the pain, like a shotgun blast to the face, someone ripping literally with a spoon, taking their eye out of their head. Both of those people survived, and they still They still got cluster headaches, even though, this just shows you what, what people are willing to do to get rid of the pain. It's no wonder why they call it suicide headache. The rate of suicide headache among cluster headache patients is 20 times higher than the general public. And yet, here I am today, I call myself lucky. I'm lucky that I got a diagnosis early, because the average time a cluster headache patient gets a diagnosis is 5 years. It's going to take 5 years to figure out when you're in pain day in and day out, and you don't know what's going on. You just know you're getting stabbed in the eye with an ice pick. So, not easy. A few weeks after my diagnosis, the attack stopped. I went into remission. And the next year, around the same time, my attacks came back with a vengeance. Mostly the hits I were getting were after midnight, 2 or 3, usually attacks after midnight. I learned that cluster headache cycles can last 6 months or more. And if you're unfortunate enough, you could become chronic and get these attacks every single day for the rest of your life. I also learned there were things that could trigger attacks, like changes in sleep pattern, sinus flare-ups, alcohol, and these are just some of the triggers. And as a firefighter, getting a sleep pattern down is not, and alcohol, I gave up alcohol a long time ago. But these are just some of the triggers, and it's impossible to avoid all of them. At this time, there was only one thing that I could do to avoid an attack, and that was take a sumatriptan pill. And I was able to take 2 a day. And if I had more than 2 attacks a day, I was screwed. And on top of that, the insurance would not pay for a full month's supply of this pill. And on top of that, if the pain got bad enough, fast enough, which a lot of times it did, I would just vomit the pill up, and then I'm screwed. I had nothing left. Over the years, I've had doctors try many medications. Nothing really, little to no success for the whole time. And at times it was costing me thousands of dollars a month. In 2010, things got worse for me. The methods that I was using to abort the attacks and to cope with the pain were no longer working. So I was on medical leave from the fire department for months, and my fire department doctor had been telling me for a few years at the time that I probably wasn't really fit for duty and I should retire. That was a rough stretch for me. I was desperate from the pain, and I decided to retire. I had to give up. I had to give up the best job in the world, being an FDNY firefighter. After that, the next few years were tough. I had lost my career. I got hooked on prescription painkillers, and I fell into a deep depression. I thought of taking my own life more than once, and I was in a cycle that lasted 7 months now. And during the peak of that cycle, I was unable to sleep for more than an hour without getting an attack for 3 weeks straight. And I was a zombie, but I didn't give up. And I didn't give up because I had a loving family around me, and I had my fire department family to support me. Not everybody has that. I searched on the internet once again. I found this group called Clusterbusters. They were a patient advocacy group, and they were really the only source of information for us out there. And on that website, they said that they had a study done at Harvard. And that study was done to see if psychedelics could help with cluster headache. Study showed that 95% of that group of cluster headache patients showed an extended remission period. So let's just say I called a friend of a friend who knew a guy that used to go to Grateful Dead concert, and I ended up with a small dose of psilocybin mushrooms. I got the nerve up to take it because I had no experience at all with psychedelics. And let's just say I had an interesting day. Yeah, it was an interesting day. But the next day, the headaches were gone. I mean, gone. Like I was in remission. Like this was a cure, Psilocybin gave me my life back. No more fear of the next attack. I could travel again, be with my family and do all these things that I couldn't do. I now had a giant sledgehammer to beat this beast that took away the life that I had. We call it the beast. The attack, cluster headache, us cluster headache patients, we call it the beast. Over the next 2 years, I would take a dose twice a year to keep the headaches at bay. We cluster headache patients call that busting. And while I was busting one day, I sort of had an out-of-body experience. And I realized how since 9/11, I had changed. I could see it. And that I was living with post-traumatic stress. I sought out help from an underground therapist. And during a breakthrough session, I relived 9/11, the whole thing. And I relived that phone call that I got from Jeanette. Sorry. I relived that phone call that I got from Jeanette, Shotzi's wife. And I could now see my survivor's guilt and the unprocessed trauma that I had been carrying with me for all these years. And today I can honestly say that psilocybin healed me physically and mentally. And in my opinion, it would be criminal not to give us access to this life-saving substance. Thank you.
Wow, Joe, thank you so much for sharing that information with us. It's so important. I just want to make sure we had invited another speaker here, and I just want to make sure he's either not in the room or online, but Brendan Cox, who's also been working with us a little bit. I'm not sure if he's here. And if he's not, then we're going to open this up or you want to?
So I know I invited representatives from the state troopers. I invited Police Chief Daniel DeWolf. I invited Rensselaer County Sheriff Russo and the Rensselaer County DA. And Sheriff Russo called me the other day. We had an extended conversation. He really did want to come. He's sorry that he couldn't attend, and he did say that he would be in support. And he didn't want me to quote him, but like his major reservation would be people consuming and then getting behind the wheel of an automobile. Now, something like what Joe is experiencing, that's not a concern. That's not what's going to happen. And driving while ability impaired is always going to be something that's criminalized, that people shouldn't do. And I don't think that we should hold a substance that can help so many people hostage because someone might abuse it and drive while ability impaired. And that's the only thing that I wanted to say on top of, oh my God, Joe, you got me. I did bring a couple of copies of some facts and research that I would pass out to the council members and anyone outside. I only have like 5 or 6 copies because there's a lot of pages. But yeah, if anyone has any other questions, comments, concerns, or would like to share as well, I guess.
Yeah, so questions for Joe or questions for anyone, or if folks want to make their own statement about this, we can pass the mic. Anyone online?
Okay, I'll start. So you mentioned that there's a bill in the legislature right now in terms of New York State developing a research program. And I know like the Capital District having a number of strong research locations, and then also with a number of companies that specialize in mushrooms. It seems like we would be really well positioned if that bill were to pass to have that Center for Research in the capital region. And do you guys have any information about how other academic institutions, you mentioned the Harvard study, and in your work on the federal level, Yale? Yeah. And I'll pass this on to you. So, what kinds of organizations are researching this, and if you can speak to some of the things that academic institutions hospitals, medical, like what's some of the research that's, shown the different outcomes on this? And I know you've got the.
So this is, yes, many pages of.
I'll just tell you the one that I know of, the study being done at Yale University right now. Dr. Emmanuel Schindler, through the VA, is doing a study with migraine and cluster headache. It's been an ongoing study for 3 years. I'm not sure who's doing the study in Basel, Switzerland, but there are other studies around the world. But those are the two big ones that are going on right now.
Yeah, and the first federally funded study since psilocybin was made illegal actually was funded this year or last year now, and is on smoking cessation. So it's an addiction related study. Yeah.
But NYU, Robert Wood Johnson, they're doing studies on the use of psilocybin for end of life anxiety. So cancer patients who are dying are undergoing these studies, and that's actually one of the reasons I got involved, because I do work in the end of life care field. And some of our supporters had been through the trials at both NYU and Robert Wood Johnson. And what it does for them is very similar to what Joe talked about. It sort of provides a breakthrough transformation with people's fear around death and dying. So we're also aware of studies of psilocybin in treatment for substance use disorder, OCD, anxiety, major depression. So there's, and aren't there like more than 17 studies?
70. There's 70 studies. There's actually a website that you can just go into, and it's like researching in like the United States or something like that. You put in parameters and it'll tell you where all these studies are being done. And I think across the United States right now, there's over 70 to 90 studies. And this pamphlet has completed studies in them. But they are actually researching obsessive compulsive disorder, autism, ADHD. So like how psilocybin can impact the people suffering from those various ailments.
I had spoke to a researcher a while back, and they said that to make a comparison, when the microscope was invented, and what that did for the field of biology, I mean, it just blew the field of biology apart. Psychedelics is going to be the same vehicle for the study of the brain. Like this came from a researcher saying so. And we spoke about this earlier. There's a ton of things that they're doing research with right now with psychedelics, and showing a lot of promise. I believe it was 20, I'm not 100% sure, but it was within the past 3 years, psilocybin got breakthrough status from the federal government, from the FDA for the research. So yeah, so it's
Yep. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons that Cory Booker and Rand Paul have proposed this bipartisan legislation to reschedule both psilocybin and MDMA actually. So, and it is going, they have acknowledged now that this is a medicine and not just yes, recreation is a healing activity, but a lot of people think, oh, it's a fun drug that you can take at a concert, but it's so much more than that. And even, a lot of people are talking about microdosing. And there's a lot of research on microdosing. What microdosing is when people take a sub-effectual level. And so it's not something that you even concretely feel, but over time, and you get an attitude change. And there are people that, used to exhibit negative behavior, like how they react to things, or like they're quick to anger. But then after microdosing, that tendency gets kind of dissolved, and they're able to reflect more on why they were reacting that way. And what I think is important in the Pat Burke bill in particular is the therapeutic aspect, so that people can actually work with a therapist and take these substances and then have their experiences immediately integrated into why they were experiencing the things they were experiencing, and how they can apply what they've now seen as change to their lives. And that's why I think it's really important. I mean, I have myself, obviously I didn't have in the 90s, there weren't therapists doing this, and I had to experience it on my own and kind of get those insights and, wrestle with them myself. But having someone to often like hold your hand while you have a blindfold on, going through this very internal journey is a beautiful thing that we should allow people to experience that are wrestling with traumas. And did you want to say anything else?
Here, we'll pass the mic because the acoustics are. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Jana Vrangalov. I'm a professor of human sexuality and relationships at NYU. And I've been working with Naima and IPAC a little bit on this issue. And I've actually heard Joe speak before and tell his story, and he still made me cry again because it's just so powerful. And I just wanted you to maybe expand a little bit on the differences that might be useful for people who are not as familiar, but the differences in how psilocybin is being taken and used for the mental health issues that we've been discussing. So the depression, anxiety, PTSD, OCD, oops, someone's unmuted there. All the addiction. Okay. Okay, this is the spot. Yeah, this is safe distance. Yeah, so the high level dosages that are being taken for that purpose and the kind of experience that one has versus what you would do for the pain conditions, and kind of the protocol of that.
So strictly for cluster headache patients, the protocol that came out, and this was all from through Cluster Busters patient advocacy. These are all patient reported numbers. Anywhere from a gram to a gram and a half of dried psilocybin mushrooms, 3 times over 15 days. You would take as little as a gram, which is really not a heavy psychedelic effect. And then you wait 5 days, and then you do it again, and then you do it again. And usually after those 15 days, most cluster headache patients are in remission. They're okay. They're not getting the attacks anymore. I will say that no 2 cluster headache patients are the same. So some people will get it after just 1 gram, and so other people that that might have to do a prolong. Also, that study that I mentioned before with migraine, there's some promising results with migraine as well. I have heard people microdose with mushrooms as well to keep their headaches away. So it's a wide range of people and dosages that works. And then it's a whole different ballgame for people that are doing it for for post-traumatic stress or what have you. But for cluster, it's as little as a gram.
Yeah, and some of those other experiences, so people who are taking it in a therapeutic environment, right now there is a huge push to train clinicians and therapists in how to administer psychedelic assisted therapy. And typically what people do is one session with their therapist where they don't take any medicine and they talk to somebody and they kind of get more of the groundwork done on like what it is that they would like to integrate. And then the next session is the medicine session, and that is anywhere between 3.5 to sometimes 8 grams of psilocybin, and that gives you a very life-changing experience. And some people say it's like an ego death. So it allows people to let go of things that, especially the traumas that they've been wrestling with, that they really won't face under natural conditions. And then the third session, after they have that experience, they come back and they then talk through their experiences with the therapist again. And that, I think, is more the model that Pat Burke's bill proposes. But that wouldn't help people like Joe. And that's why I don't think that bill goes far enough.
One other thing I wanted to mention. It's not just Joe that's getting help. No, I know. Well, this is the point I want to make. I'm glad you mentioned it. Everybody knows ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, right? So the amount of people in the United States that have Lou Gehrig's disease is the same amount of people that have cluster headache, and nobody knows what cluster headache is, and there's no money in research. So we're estimating over 500,000 people in the country have it. and maybe even more that don't even know they have it, because there's that 5-year period where they don't get diagnosed. They get misdiagnosed with something else. I mean, they go to a dentist, they go to an ENT. People have had their teeth pulled. They've had their the nerve removed from their head. I mean, like, you know, seriously, some really nightmare stories, and they end up just getting the attacks again. So you know, there's a large group of people in this country that would benefit from it.
And the other demographic of people who are currently taking it are the people that are microdosing, and people that take like a little capsule or a few mushrooms or whatever dosage that is good for them, because you know everyone does have to determine their own dose because there's no support right now, and that is something that also wouldn't really fit the Pat Burke bill, because you know people are taking it kind of as a maintenance thing to help like regulate their system and their experience, and so that's something that too is usually like 0.25 to 1 gram, depending on you know what their tolerance is, and yeah, sure.
So currently, right now, I'm microdosing myself. And for me, it's like you're saying, it's maintenance. It's done wonders. It's been like a light switch on my depression and anxiety. It helps me get out of bed every day. Without it, I couldn't imagine, you know, doing my day to day and just being overwhelmed with emotion. And what it helps me do is it helps me to identify and become aware of those things that I'm too overwhelmed or too supercharged to sort of sort out. What happens during my depression is I get so overwhelmed that I just shut down. And shutting down doesn't allow me to get out of bed. Shutting down doesn't allow me to concentrate on, you know, my work that I have to do for that day. And what it's helped me do is kind of slow down and reassess what I'm actually feeling and the things that I need to sort of be aware of and work through. And through journaling, in addition to journaling with the microdosing and just being very open about those things that I've been going through, it has allowed me to, I guess, relieve myself. So it's not the psilocybin that's actually relieving me. It's psilocybin giving me the space and the energy to help me help myself. And I touched on it a little bit where I was doing talk therapy and it wasn't really doing too much after a certain point. And that was only because I was being so overwhelmed. I didn't know those things to, you know, get help for, or the things that were so in my subconscious that I didn't know how to speak about. So after microdosing and even taking not necessarily a heroic dose, but 5.4 grams or for the first time. And that completely blew open my whole mind as far as the things that I didn't know that I was suffering from. And from there, the continued work afterward was really helping me to just basically assess everything and to go to my therapist after that and to speak about those things that came up from my journaling. And that just did wonders.
Can you talk to us about an integration circle that you with the Psychedelic Sisterhood?
Well, the integration circles are the way we have it done, or people will come with their experiences with psychedelics, and you know, it's a group therapy, so we all will support each other. So it's not one-on-one, but sometimes people come wanting to know more about psychedelics, and for people that have gotten themselves into like a very difficult space and needing to talk it out and needing support from other people in our groups, they're able to really talk about everything. And the important thing about integration groups versus, say, going to someone that doesn't know about psychedelics is you don't have to over explain the things that you see and you feel and you hear, or, you know, kind of, or if you do hallucinate, the things that you are being shown. And that develops a really close-knit community of people that understand you and accept you right off the bat. So it becomes much easier to speak about those things that, you know, you're going through, you're brought into your awareness. And through just support with the group, and sometimes people want suggestions or advice on those things that they feel. And yeah, that's kind of what it is. It's just very supportive group.
Yeah, does anyone else have any questions or comments? Right, right.
I think one of the things that it would be good, since we have some time to talk about, is what we can all do, right? And so things are happening at the federal level. I think in the next 2 years, we'll probably see a massive change at the federal level around psilocybin. But the legislative session here in Albany just got started, and Linda Rosenthal's bill was reintroduced. We expect that Pat Burke's bill will be reintroduced. And so what can we all do? I mean, NIPAC formed so that we could do some collective action together. And so I just want to encourage people, if you are interested in seeing psychedelics legalized, visit us on Instagram, go to our website, NIMA.com, get involved, be on our legislative committee. We're starting to meet with lawmakers now. So if you want to come and share your experience or ask questions, this is the place to be. But I'm actually wondering, since we are in the city council chambers, if we could talk for a moment about what we could do here in Troy, because it's one thing to go to Albany and lobby for a state bill that will impact the entire state, but what can we do here? There are models, there are other cities that have deprioritized law enforcement. They've said to their law enforcement officers, we don't want you to prioritize these crimes. And they do it sometimes in cooperation with law enforcement that doesn't want to be focusing on these crimes. It saves money, and it shows a level of support for recognizing that these are beneficial substances. We could also, in Troy, we could do a resolution calling on the legislature to pass one of these bills. We could say that we want to see the capital region become a hub of research, and that's why we support this bill. There's so many things that we could do at this level to express support for this growing movement. And I'm just curious if anybody wants to talk about that. No pressure. Thoughts?
Yeah, so I know Emily mentioned this earlier, but RPI is like I went to RPI, so there's a lot of research going on there already. We have Regeneron and other places, so it is a potential hub that could happen in Troy. It's already, happening. And, maybe it can be, I know, SAGE has a psychology department as well. RPI, less such, but, there are definitely avenues that we could research. And, there's a history of those kinds of research being done in Troy. So, I'm definitely open to learning more for sure.
Yeah. I know our public safety committee had a workshop earlier 2022 regarding mental health crises and the impact on homelessness within the city and how it impacted with county health. And so, I think one of the things, because it's something that I think all of us in council are concerned about, and especially with the impact on our paramedics and our EMTs, who will bring someone who's in mental distress and to the hospital, and there really aren't resources for them. So I think one of the things that, in terms of as we're speaking with our constituents or educating them who are bringing these other concerns, mental health crises concerns, our ambulances bringing people to the hospital, and then they're also our firefighters. And then how it can be integrated. Our Troy's police force is unique in the state and possibly the nation, in that our chief has taken the leadership with and over, what is it? Over 95% of our police force is now trained in, has done a 40-hour training in responding to people in mental health crises. And we're really a leader in the state and arguably the US, which is not widely known, but it's something that, having more information to be able to share with our constituents is, I think, really helpful. And, some sample policy so that we have a chance to discuss and review it and see if there are things that we want to do, that whether it's formal or very informal. I think that's helpful. I don't know what your thoughts are, you got for that.
I'm here to listen and get more educated, obviously.
Okay.
I went to Joe, her story, just so impactful, and thank you, everyone here. Obviously, it's something that the state and the federal government really has the control. But I guess my one big question, Avery, do you see it going down a path similar to cannabis, where it's more medicinal, rather than recreational? And do you see it going down that path first? And then potentially down the road, we saw what happened with cannabis, but do you see it going down that path first? Yep, sure.
It's like,
So I think any movement for social change has to face this question of incrementalism and what do you start with first when there's a big change, right? And so you've got these competing pieces of legislation, but they don't have to be competing. I don't know, and maybe Assemblymember McDonald might want to say a few words as well. I don't want to put you on the spot, Assemblymember, but the adult use marijuana was pending in the legislature for more than 20 years. And then medical marijuana picked up steam. There was testimony from folks like Joe who came up to Albany, kids who were suffering terminally from various conditions, and they pulled on the heartstrings of lawmakers. And we finally got medical marijuana done, and it brought relief to people at the end of their lives, to kids, to people suffering from seizures. It was incredible. And then it wasn't too long before people recognized that adult use marijuana should be allowed as well. Not just because there were, let's face it, there are racial justice implications for marijuana decriminalization. People were being locked up disproportionately in this country and in this state. Here, what's interesting, and I think we see this with medical marijuana and recreational marijuana, is that distinction between recreation and therapy is a little bit of a false dichotomy. Think about it. When you're depressed, when you're down and you see your doctor, what do they tell you to do? Go hang out with friends, take a walk in nature, find a hobby. Those are all recreational things, but they improve our mental health immeasurably. So the idea that psychedelic drugs are either recreational or therapeutic, it's all therapeutic, just like what we're seeing with marijuana. How many people have you all talked to who have now taken marijuana legally and it's improved their mental health? Just think about it. You talk to people who share those stories. The same thing is going to happen with psychedelics as well. And it's already happening. If we held up our hands and talked about how many people have used psychedelics in this room, I bet it would reflect the statistics that Avery talked about, around 40% within the year. So I think we will see this incremental approach at the state level. I think Pat Burke's bill has a much better chance of passing first. But then I do think that Linda Rosenthal's bill will pass, just like the trajectory of marijuana.
Yeah. There's also a spectrum there in terms of what are the kinds of things that are going to come online. So for example, Rosenthal's bill does not have sales decriminalized or legalization of sales, so that you wouldn't be able to buy mushrooms in a store. It decriminalizes possession, growth, and sharing and gifting, but not sales. So then there can be another step that can be taken if we decide that we want to then sell mushrooms. So there are these kind of different aspects of both the legalization aspect or the decriminalization aspect. So what does the government allow us to do with these substances or not allow us to do? And then there is the other component of how is the government helping us use these substances for healing? And are they providing some sort of guidelines for how that healing can happen? Who can provide that healing? What's the context in which that healing happens, and so on? So, and yeah, as they said, these are not necessarily competing perspectives. And we did see that currently in Colorado and Oregon, in both of those states, of course, those states work differently because they have referenda, but they, in both cases, legalized at the same time or made a step forward in both of these approaches. So in Oregon, at the same time, they both decriminalized possession of all substances in their Prop 110, I think, right? And then they legalized psilocybin in Prop 109 at the same time. And then in Oregon, they combined these two into the same law. And so they're happening at the same time. So those are two examples of states where these are going to happen at the same time. And then the other states, it's going to be more of the, let's do the medicinal way first and then see how that goes and then take it forward. And when you talk to researchers, I've been talking to a lot of the researchers who are doing some of the research on the ground for not just psilocybin, but also LSD and ibogaine, which is another substance that is used in addiction treatment. And they also show concern that maybe we don't want to go too fast in legalizing everything all at once until we really know what and when and how this can be helpful, and when and what and how this might be hurtful. And because there are negative experiences that people can have if they're not screened properly, if they're not prepped properly, like what Avery was talking about, that preparation session or several preparation sessions that need to happen, especially for people who are suffering of certain things that they might not be ready for dealing with them on their own recreationally. And then the integration session or sessions, many sessions sometimes that need to happen post, is that going to be done well and properly? And so there are some concerns around how we do this and how quickly we do this. And we want to make sure that it's safe. I think we're all are working on this, want to provide access to these substances to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, but also as safely as possible. And so there's some balancing act there to be done.
Oh, is that allowed? We can turn this up, Assembly Member, hold on one sec.
Sound in this.
I don't know. Let's see. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Hey, Avery, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, Corinne, suggested maybe I might want to make a few comments. So I'd like to, because I think this is obviously, a very interesting topic to me and to many members of the legislature. And it's interesting because I think people are looking at what just happened with marijuana and should this happen? And, you've heard the expression a tale of two cities. Well, these are really a tale of two technically illicit substances. Marijuana was extremely widespread use. Unfortunately, had a many sad chapters of history back in the 60s and 70s in regards to incarceration, particularly in the Black community. And interestingly enough, as everything changed, we started incrementally with medical marijuana, which I was extremely on board my first year in the legislature. We passed it the second year, not just because of age, just to be clear, but it sure as heck helped Dick Godfrey when he his prime co-sponsor was actually the only healthcare professional legislator, saying there's merit to this because it's a controlled environment. And that's really what led us to legalization of marijuana or decriminalization of marijuana, because, and I was not a big fan of it when I first got to the legislature, but like anything else, God gives you 2 ears, one mouth, here's the one you have the most of. And as you started to listen and recognize that, and this is where my pharmacy background comes into play, there's something to be said to have consistency and quality standards. Drug dealers have a lot of things. They don't have quality standards. They don't have, right? They don't. Whereas we are actually basically, I call Prohibition 2.0. Basically, just like you can handle 1 beer or 2, you'll be able to handle a certain amount of marijuana because you're going to have consistency. And you're going to have product that's approved by the state of New York. And same token, we shouldn't have to worry about infiltration of fentanyl, xylazine into product either, which is happening in the streets. So, there's a widespread market, and we are taking the proper steps to, one, decriminalize it, and also to provide a stable environment going forward. Psilocybin and the psychedelics are a little bit interesting. I checked with the city of Troy in the last couple of days to say how many people have been arrested for possession, and they don't have any records in several years. So it's not today, I hope I'm not jinxing anybody, at least in Troy, New York, a criminalization issue, right? Where police are raiding houses and arresting people and incarcerating them. That's not an issue, at least that I know of. And please, I would love to be corrected if I'm wrong. So the other aspect that's really exciting is that federal government's actually really engaged. They are engaged in the research and the opportunity. So, I think Pat Burke's bill, as Corinne or somebody else mentioned, probably has a better chance first, because Linda's well-intentioned, but I don't know if that's really the main focus right now. The main focus is to get more research development, to get some fine-tuning. There are many therapists out there that are really making this their life's mission to help people. And we need to, I know people have their own thoughts about the FDA and what we've been through, but the reality is you got to rely on something. I think more clinical trials that demonstrate proven benefits are going to be very helpful for us going down the road. So those are that's probably 3 cents, more than 2 cents on the whole concept. So it's a whole different approach to marijuana. To me, it's a whole different approach. And that's okay. That's welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Assembly Member. There was something that you said, though, about the fact that the city of Troy isn't raiding homes and arresting people for possession of psilocybin. That made me think about something that Joe said earlier. And when Joe read the studies about the impact of psilocybin on headaches, he called a friend who called a guy who called a friend who used to go to Dead shows. And Joe was willing to take a chance on the underground market to actually heal these cluster headaches. I just want to say I'm willing to take those chances in the underground market. And Pammy was, and Avery was, I guess, at some point. But there are so many people who aren't willing to go to the underground market. They don't feel safe doing so, even with the statistics that no one's getting arrested. So the people who actually have access to the healing of these drugs are only people who are privileged enough to not fear an underground market or law enforcement, which is kind of the flip side to what you were saying is so different about marijuana. I mean, people were being locked up, denied housing, lost custody of their kids. In this case, people aren't actually getting the healing benefits of psilocybin because they want to be law abiding and they don't want to go to the underground market. And one of the most affecting stories that I ever heard, I want to ask Avery to tell.
Sure. Well, like I said, being in the mushroom farm, people do come in all the time and ask if I know how to get them or where they can secure them. And this one was a gentleman in his 70s who, I mean, he was almost crying when he walked into the farm, and he had watched that How to Change Your Mind. He had watched the Fantastic Fungi, yep, they're both on Netflix. If you haven't seen them, they're amazing. And his father, who was in his 90s, was struggling at end of life, and he wanted to help his father, and he was just like, we've tried everything else, and I want to be able to relieve my father's suffering. And I mean, I had to tell him to come to a meeting because I couldn't help him, and that's what tears me apart, is when people come to me and I should be able to direct them to get help, or give them some kind of suggestion other than like, hey, we'll come to this meeting, maybe we can do something. And that causes me trauma. We're stuck in this loop where like there are these things that are so easy to grow on your own. Like there's definitely a myriad of ways that you can learn how to manufacture the medicine that can keep you regulated and help your friends and family and help yourself. And because it's illegal right now, I can't tell people how to do it. It's even if it's not being enforced, because I'm not going to risk my business and my life over something that could impact me, as much as I want to help people.
Anyone else online want to say anything?
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, hold on a second.
I just wanted to say that, there is a body of evidence out there what it looks like when a city decriminalizes, and that's from Denver. I'm a Colorado attorney with a practice out there. I practice psychedelic law. And in 2018, mushrooms were decriminalized in the city of Denver. And 2 years after that, there was the City Mushroom Policy Review Panel came back with their findings. A panel made up with a combination of the district attorney, law enforcement, activists, and the findings were quite remarkable. Not surprising to people in the psychedelic community, but there really were no negative impacts that were demonstrated throughout the city. There was no widespread increases in drunk driving or drug driving. There were no large increases in emergency room visits, needs for intervention by law enforcement with citizens. There was really nothing that came about it that really suggested that, there was a downside to the decriminalization whatsoever, other than the fact that if it happened, you could be arrested and prosecuted at the state level, and it was still a felony. But within the city itself, it was, there was no increase in youth usage or access. And it allowed people to access life-changing medicine on their own through cultivation and gifting, because there's no sales, and allowed therapists to pursue this. And and then Colorado moved forward, and we finally now legalized it at the state level, and we're anxious to see where it goes from there. So there is data out there, and I would advise anybody who's interested to read the panel's findings. They're they're quite impressive for the safety of the substance and safety throughout society. Thank you.
Hey, thanks a lot. Great group here. I'm a primary care physician in Albany, and I've certified about 1,000 people for medical marijuana, and we've kind of made a mess of the whole medical marijuana field, really quagmired in politics, money, and my primary interest at about a year ago, when they started to give out licenses for adult use, recreational use, adult use program, was to do research. And me and Alan Gandelman, who is a terrific guy, he's the president of the Hemp Growers Association and Processing. He and I approached several HMOs locally to try to get them interested in funding research projects, and they all just scattered because it was illegal on a federal level. And so research, there's more research on psilocybin now than I believe in marijuana, even though marijuana has been around for so much longer and be used much more widely. So I think psilocybin is not going to be quagmired in the money. For instance, Etain just sold their vertical integration license. You have to have, you can sell or you can grow or you can process marijuana, but there has to be different entities for each one of those levels. But there's five vertically integrated licenses, and they just sold theirs for $250 million to that way they can grow it, sell it, process it, et cetera. So there's a lot of money involved in that. I don't think we've done a good job in New York State with this, and it's a shame that it's federally illegal and the research isn't there. Now, psilocybin, I believe, and also, I've done 1,000 people. Yes, it does work for PTSD, for chronic pain, for Crohn's disease, but most of the time, not that well. I think the psilocybin has a much greater potential. And I'll leave you with one last thought. The other psychedelic that is often mentioned along with psilocybin is dextromethorphan, which is another psychedelic acting on a similar receptor system. And it was just fast-tracked through the FDA and given when it's piggybacked with Wellbutrin, which people are familiar with, bupropion. It was fast-tracked because it was such a novel antidepressant. And dextromethorphan is being used as an add-on to bupropion, which is Wellbutrin. And within about 5 days, there's significant antidepressant properties to this drug. And it's a psychedelic. So I think that the corollary is that psilocybin, a psychedelic, has tremendous potential medical impact with my patients who certainly need it for depression. And also there's multiple studies on pain control, et cetera, migraines, et cetera, which I think are fascinating. And there's a lot more research out there. So I think it has way more potential for this country than marijuana has. And, you look at the anti-tumor properties of THC, and that's not even been investigated, for brain tumors. It delays glioblastoma growth significantly, but no one's studying it. It's so quagmired in politics and connotation and history that I think it's sort of dead in the water. I can't see it moving anywhere, which is unfortunate. And so I think our interest as an add-on for depression, psilocybin is really a great opportunity. And that's my primary interest is depression. If we can use it for chronic pain and migraines and other things, that's great. But I would, I was interested. I was invited by a nurse practitioner. I'm not sure if she's here. Oh, there you are. To this group, because it's not, what's that? And I think it's great you guys are meeting and trying to figure out how to do this. And if anybody wants to include me in their research project, I know a lot of people at the medical center, and I've been around for a while. So I do know a lot of people, and I think this represents a great opportunity to help the patients and not be quagmired by the medical marijuana, obstacles that they faced. And that's about all I have to say.
I've had a long drive today.
I'm just gonna throw out another point about the decriminalization, the necessity of that for some people that are taking psilocybin or other psychedelics in through the underground market, and maybe parents, teachers, nurses, doctors who are sort of putting themselves at danger of losing their jobs or losing their kids if that came out, because it is criminalized. And so that's one of the things that Linda's bill, for example, would do. It would prevent those kinds of things from happening. So just throwing it out there. That was a note from Aaron. So, and then someone wanted to speak online.
I just wanted to add the point about the solicitation of acquiring. So, you know, like you said, some people will be willing to go out and seek the treatment, but also on the, like on Avery's side, you know, for us to actually provide those things is just, we shouldn't be at fault or at risk or anything like that to help people. It's just, it's very demoralizing to have access to such an amazing tool and knowing what it does for people and not be able to, the only thing being able to do is say, hey, go to this meeting or do this. And when you hear those incredible stories, you know, I have stories of mothers that, you know, are overwhelmed, like Corinne said, and knowing what it can do for you. And it's so frustrating not being able to point into the right direction, or even having to ourselves would have to put yourself at a risk of, you know, with the law. So it's just not something that's fair. So.
And also works with the mushroom.
Anyone else online or in the room have a question or something they want to say?
That's it. Just because we do have, I'm moving away from that. It's the speaker. Yeah, this is like, we just have to have the like no talking part of the room. Yeah, and well, because we do, you know, and this is maybe, you know, as we're exploring and learning more about this, and sort of synthesizing that information, you know, and knowing that there's a bill in the New York State legislature moving towards the allowing more research in New York. And this may be something for Assemblyman McDonald and some of the other attorneys in the room. You know, one of the things that municipalities may, or counties may, or regions may want to look at doing is establishing an appropriate and safe space for a therapeutic treatment, either an academic or a clinical setting with licensed providers, and so that we can become a hub of that research and partnering with, you know, institutions like Harvard and Yale, and that may be something where, you know, there are very clear guardrails that law enforcement is comfortable with, our, you know, district attorneys are comfortable with, and it'd be very interesting for us to learn more about how other places like Denver, like academic institutions, how have they been able to do this research, and what are limitations that have been put on it, but that also, like, you know, one of the things I heard people say is, you know, there's the controlled production, there's a controlled process, you know, that your product, your medicine, the substance you're using as part of, you know, and running a controlled experiment is not adulterated. And so, you know, where is the opportunity there for Troy or the capital region or Rensselaer County as a whole? So, you know, that kind of information, I think, flowing back to us and to other elected officials is useful, because you can create a way that people can access healthcare under the appropriate guidance and get the full, you know, supported experience. So,
You know, just so you know, there was a motive to my question, because I saw firsthand, my son who suffers from epilepsy, and, we were super psyched when the medicinal cannabis was passed, and then we found out it would be close to $1,000 a month, and his insurance wouldn't cover it. So James is on the oil, the cannabis oil, which does have the THC, and it seems to be having a little bit of an impact. But saying that, there was a motive to my question because I was curious, are you going down that path, which the doctor rightly said, it's almost near to impossible to get it before they legalized it. So, you know, we found out firsthand that obviously he wasn't able to get. We didn't have $1,000 a month. And as you know, you have to go up and down with the levels and figure out what the right dose is, which could have been 6, 7 months after. So needless to say, that's why I did ask about that. So, thank you.
So there's pluses and minuses to going that route of therapeutic use and more widespread use. But I think what we're hearing from the doctor is that you know, there's a history around marijuana that made that process more fraught. Psilocybin is so much different. Not only is it more studied, as he noted, and as Avery pointed out, but it's also, you know, what I wanted to do this in the beginning and I totally forgot to do it. Everybody knows about magic mushrooms, but psilocybin is the naturally occurring substance in magic mushrooms. And then it's psilocybe, right? That psilocin that is synthesized when it enters your body. And so it is, the mushroom itself is the drug, you know, as opposed to a manufactured drug. And so this question about quantity and adulteration, it's a pretty pure, it's the mushroom is the drug, and then it acts in your system. And so it's really about the quantity, and people play around with the quantity to make sure that it's having the effect, right, Joe? And it's such a small amount of that substance that has these profound effects on people. 0.1 grams is what people are taking to microdose. So anyway, I think it's probably going to go a similar route in terms of therapeutic use and then adult use opening up. But I think it's going to look a whole lot different because of the substance itself and the history and the studies that have already been done. Don't you agree?
Yeah, and I know, you know, we mentioned the social justice. It's not as impactful in a social justice arena as cannabis seems to have been, but it's not as obvious. And that's the real thing, is because, you know, we have quite a few people who are, you know, that have much, you know, don't have my complexion and just don't feel as safe in trying to secure some of the medicine that they need to heal, or that they want to attempt to heal. And so, you know, while I might not have that fear, you know, there are so many other people who are like, have heard about the benefits, but just because of their, you know, demographic, they're like, oh, there's no way I'm going to try to get this because I'm going to get, you know, extra, you know, blasted by the law. And that's something that we have to really acknowledge and take into account. And I do think that if, you know, Troy or the county or, you know, any state, any movement that we can, you know, make is going to help people find healing, I think would be a great benefit and a gift to people.
Yeah.
Place where people. So this is probably not a good comparison, but it's a comparison that it's worth looking at. Basically, opioids garnered illegally are considered illegal substances. As you know, in New York City, opioid prevention centers are operating in 2 locations. And basically they are operating totally legally with the cooperation of government. The government has chosen to look the other way because, as I've always said to people about opioid prevention centers, whether you like them or not, the one thing I can guarantee you is if your son or daughter walked in there, they'd walk out alive. That's not the case on an average day in the streets. So if there was a psilocybin institute or a research body that was established and recognized by the state, I'm not saying the state would do this, but basically working with the U.S. Attorney General or DA to make sure that they understand what's going on, that they're not going to be knocking on the doors of these facilities. No, I don't say it's an easy thing to accomplish, but I don't think it's, I don't want it to be thought of as being impossible. Like I said earlier, and that you all have alluded to, because you're much more learned in this than I, there are many academic, clinical folks who are 100% on board. This is going to happen because it is safe and it can be effective. And no, my heart breaks for people. Listen, I'm a pharmacist for 35 years. Plenty of patients who've had cluster headaches that your heart breaks for them because they are truly immobilized most of the time. And as much as there are many disease states where unfortunately young children have to wait till someday something happens, I understand the concern and the frustration about this situation because there is an option that's out there floating around, probably a little more safer than what the street dealers are doing. But we want to make sure that still nobody gets incarcerated by any stretch of the imagination. So there's a mechanism. I think it needs some more dialogue. It also needs, you have to kind of figure out a way for the state to recognize this as a research project, which I think is helpful. But at least under the current administration in Washington, it's been clearly documented that they're willing to recognize that sometimes the best approach is not with the sword, it's with the shield. To be protective and not to hurt anybody, see if somebody can be helped. Hope that makes sense.
Well, we have a time limit on this room and it is approaching 8:30. So I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I want to encourage you to sign up for our mailing list. If you are not on Instagram or if you can't remember NY Psilocybin Action Network, NY Psilocybin Action Committee at gmail.com. Just come over and give me your email address and we'll sign you up. We definitely need help on our IT committee. We need help on our legislative committee. We need help with communications. So if you've got some particular skills that you want to lend to this effort, please see me afterwards. But yes, we've got a pamphlet here that we'll send around. And I think Joe wants to say one last word before we wrap up.
If you wanted more information on cluster headaches, you can go to Clusterbusters, that's one word, clusterbusters.org. And it was one thing I didn't mention before about cluster headaches. There is no painkiller that they can give you to help the pain. There's no opiates, no painkillers will take the pain away of cluster headache. That's it. Thank you.
Anything else?
No, and I just want to say thank you, Carmela. Thank you, council members, for letting us use your space and listening to us tonight. Thank you, everyone that tuned in online and through the council YouTube stream too. And thank you, everyone in the room for coming in. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Thank you.